That's a lie. We don't have any technical difficulties. We're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Dyson Design. And once again, I'm joined by Tyler from the channel Frame Zombie One. The link is in the description below. And today, Tyler wanted to talk about cinematic gameplay. So we're gonna do just that. Hello, Tyler. How you been?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Busy with the holidays, obviously. It's our first one since a month, so
Yeah.
good to be back. Good to see all of you in the chat, who I don't see yet, obviously, because no one's saying anything. But you get the sentiment. um, oh, there we are.
Yeah.
Hey, O'Neill Flynn.
And
Hey,
Malum
Mallow and
Morris.
Morris. All right. So
So
cinematic game.
cinematic,
Yeah.
yeah, cinematic role play or cinematic gaming. How do you call the term? Cinematic play? Doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. How do
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
define it?
Well, so a while ago, I just did direct association, which is what I think a lot of people did, because a lot of times I hear cinematic play and I think, oh, you've got a GM that wants to tell, a story. He's got a
Hmm.
movie script that's pre-written and he wants to, say some very specific things, and it kind of defeats the purpose of it. Um Hey, Dark Maya.
Yeah.
Um But as I've gotten to know more people who describe their own style as cinematic, and I've seen, either their games or the way they describe their games, and it's not at all like that, I've found that it's more, at least in the context that we're using it, referring to pacing mostly, as
Hmm.
in movie style pacing, which is not a constant, obviously, and we'll get into that, but not letting things overtly slow down. Hey, Crafting Gamer.
Yeah.
Um, Not letting things overtly slow down, having things be interesting, which again is going to be different for everybody, but that's basically, if you can think of a movie where this happens, or if you can think, even if this hasn't happened in a movie, would it be interesting for it to happen in a movie? Would you watch the session back and be interested in it? Um, uh, Things like that, avoiding, conversations of mechanics as much as possible,
Yeah.
because if you're looking at a movie or TV show or whatever, with some rare exceptions like the sort of lit RPG anime, and things like that, where they're talking about the game mechanics because they're in a game or whatever.
Hmm.
But again,
Which I
that
hate.
setting, right? Yeah, yeah, and that's but focusing on the setting, there's with some rare oddities, nobody's pulling out a gun and then asking, well, how do they're not stopping for 5 minutes and explaining how a gun works, right, in the
Yeah.
middle of the action scene. So I think it's a lot about pacing.
Yeah. I think pacing is the right is the right difference here, like the
Mhm.
different thing element, right? Because like it's about like cutting like the little meaningless chit chat that doesn't
Mhm.
like advance the scene, right?
Mm.
And pacing, like your pacing doesn't have to be like all action, all super fast pace all the time. You can have like conversations, stuff like that, but the conversation needs to serve a purpose, something, right? Needs to be building upon something. So if you want to make a plan for something and you have time, stuff like that, you have that in movie as well, right? You have that, like you have some movie where people like take time to plan something,
Mm.
and then you have like interesting dialogue and you build a character through that. But you need to be building something, you need to be moving forward. Like it's not just killing time, right? Those are the things that left that are left on the cutting floor, basically, like in a movie, I think. And the mechanic thing as well, it's like it's trimming down all this needless fat, right?
Mm. Yeah, and I would say we can get into a discussion of like the other sort of styles, like sometimes you'll hear like the sort of tactical role play, the tactical gaming uh element of things, as in like direct opposition to cinematic role play. And I think that's kind of a false dichotomy, because like you said, you can have those discussions of tactics in character.
Yeah.
People people tactically discuss in real life all the time. Although you could argue that simulationism is a yet again a different style, because sometimes in reality things are slow, things are not
Hmm.
moving at a movie pace. It would be quite boring. For me personally, though, I can look at other games like simulationist games like Arma, if you know that, and I ask, why would I want to simulate 3 hours of driving a logistics truck from point A to point B? Yeah, that's realistic, but is it interesting? For me, no.
Yeah,
I would rather just cut to the part where I have to jump out and defend my logistics truck all of a sudden because I'm on a dangerous highway. Uh, the routine, the things going routinely should be quick, few
yeah,
sentences. Yeah, it goes well. Great. Yeah.
yeah. This is something I say a lot. Like like when we're at the table, we're telling the story of the protagonist, which are
Mm,
the player character, right? The protagonist of the story that we're creating together, and
mm,
we'll figure out what it is, right? We're going through it, and we're creating the story through
mhm,
play. But what we want to focus on is the interesting part of those character life.
mm,
We don't necessarily want, like, and some people want to do that, like the day to day,
mhm,
yeah, like this very simulationist approach. Like some people like want to play those flight simulator game where you go
mm.
from, oh, I take off from Los Angeles and then I fly to Tokyo and nothing happened during the, but you're just there, like you have to watch your instrument, you're just sitting like, some people want to do that. Some people want to do, oh, okay, now there's the big battle, let's figure out where everybody of those 10,000 combatants are and what they do, and make a few dice roll, and then we calculate like how much oh, does any of them like have their horse lose a nail that make
Mm.
him lose his horseshoe and whatever, right?
Mm,
But yeah, that's not what I'm interested in.
mm.
Like I'm interested in the characters, right? That's why I'm
Eh,
always I talk a lot about that. I say what make story interesting, what makes
yeah,
story what we that we connect to is characters.
and
And
that's a hyperbolic example, but you can see these actual examples, right? Somebody spending 5 minutes looking up a rule in the book,
mhm,
where after they've looked up the rule, they find out, well, you didn't even need to roll a die for this, because no matter what you did, they ended up dying. You're
yeah,
turns out the minimum damage you do kills them anyways. So we just spent 5 minutes, making sure we were right for no reason, really. Um, so yeah, it's and 5 minutes may not sound like much, but when it happens once and then twice and then three times, it starts to add up, and you can get a lot done in
yeah,
15 minutes. I mean, there's some TV shows that with commercials, they're only 15 minutes, Um,
yeah, and
obviously there's
that's
stuff pre-planned in a TV show, so they can curate, like you said, they have a cutting room
yeah.
floor that they can go back and see. Well, that's not really important, but still.
And yeah, and you mentioned like those looking in the rule in the book, like that's also like another concern that would take you
Mhm,
away from like outside of like the pure simulation,
mm,
just like the at any cost being rule as written, right? Just like
mm,
the raw at any cost.
mm,
Yeah, that also will take you away from the cinematic mood.
mm,
And the cinematic role play is kind of the responsibility of everybody at the table, because like you say as well, like in TV shows and movie, like they're pre-planned, like the
mm,
script is written, and then like, and I know that I've done that a bit, like when I was younger, right? Like the you go through the script and you cut the fat, you trim it, right? You say, okay, no, maybe like those two characters can be combined into one. This scene can be taken out. This, and then you make the story tighter. Like when you create something, it's much easier to make something bloated, and then like you go down and you reduce it.
I'm
Uh,
kicking myself for forgetting the who the quote's from, but it's the I regret that I didn't have time to write less.
yeah,
Because it's
and
easy.
I
I
heard
can
that
type
before as well. I forgot who which
I can
was.
type you up a type in chat if you remember who that quote is from. I think I'm paraphrasing it, but it's
Yeah,
I can write you up a wall of text like that.
yeah.
It's editing it down that's the
It's like
hard
something
part.
like, I'm sorry
Yeah.
that I don't have time to make my letter briefer or something like
Yeah.
that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Um uh Hateful Metal Dragon.
yeah.
Lost
But
me for a second.
and so of course when we're playing, like we don't have the thing pre-planned.
Mm-hmm.
We shouldn't, at least in my opinion.
Yes,
So
smart brain. Yes.
so
Thank you,
yeah,
Arman. Hello.
yeah. I don't have the time to make a shorter letter. Yeah. So that we don't have like this cutting floor, because everything is like we're making up as we go. So it's the responsibility of everybody at the table to figure out, oh, okay, now this scene is dragging on. Let's try to move it forward. Let's try to like, okay, let's go. It's time to go now. Let's, or the GM sometime like just kind of an example like in the werewolf game that we had. That's something that Phil and we also did like a kind of review. We went through some scene there last night with Rick, Crispy, and Phil the Trill. And he at some point, like, we're spotting this SUV with this bad guy in it, and we're trying to make a plan about like, how to approach the situation. And then just Phil say the door of the SUV open, and somebody starts stepping out, and they say, okay, now it's fucking go time, right?
Mm,
There's no more time for planning.
yeah.
And that's a very good way, just like just a little in, just a little push there, like, it's not putting on your railroad. It's just
Mhm.
like something's happening, right?
Mm. And that's an interesting point to make too, is that everyone can push the pacing
Hmm.
to some extent. If
Yep.
something's slow because of, two people are just talking around a campfire and it's small talk. It doesn't tell you anything about their character. And uh you can look to like what can look like small talk on the surface in things like Lord of the Rings, where they have to explain to Gollum what a potato is. Where it's like that can seem like just a jokey thing, but it's like, well, no, it tells you a bit about the characters. You know,
Hmm.
Sam is starting to get irritated at the journey. Gollum is he's this depraved creature that doesn't even know about like a basic staple food. But if you've had that same conversation more or less for the second or third time that you're sitting around the campfire and it's starting to drag on, you don't even need to wait for the GM necessarily to, move on or make something happen. Although the GM can do that, you as a player can also, interject things,
Yep.
make things happen. You get irritated that these guys are still yakking it up at night. You put out the fire and go, come on, something's gonna hear us. Something's gonna attack us in the middle of the night. Shut it.
Yeah, or you just like, oh, like you just like get irritated, say like, oh, we have this conversation some other time, I'm going to sleep. And then like that's okay,
Yeah,
now you close that scene, right? The scene was
yeah,
going
yeah.
nowhere anymore. You close it, like, or you're
Mhm.
just like, oh, you know what? We have no time to discuss anymore. It's time to get
Mm.
moving.
Yeah,
Like we'll talk about that on the road, right? And then
yeah.
you can move like the action at least somewhere else, and then you can like, if you still want to do like some chit chat and like planning and stuff like that, at least now you're doing it while you're moving, right? You're not just
Mhm.
like sitting in the tavern for 2 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's another thing with cinematic characters is your character needs to have a goal. You need to desire something, and that doesn't have to be even an achievable goal. It can be a progressive goal. It can be something as simple as I want to get stronger. I want to get more money. I want to, it doesn't have to be specifically attainable, and it doesn't have to be necessarily in line with the rest of the party. The real issue comes when your character doesn't have a goal, and that's when you get those dreaded 2-hour tavern scenes, usually during the first
Yep.
session, where all of a sudden, because your character didn't have a goal, you have to come up with why the hell would my character go after this? And a lot of the time, that problem is due to the world not having enough threats. There's not a scarcity. There's not a big enough problem. You see this a lot in modern fantasy, or at least I do, where the world is basically fine and you could just sit there and continue living a normal life if you didn't go on the adventure. So why go on the adventure? In those sort of settings, you really need a goal that brings you out of the town.
Yeah, it's like being having like fleshed out characters and stuff like that, and and I think that's what I always like I say when when I'm about to start a campaign, I'm gonna tell the player like, well, this is gonna be the initial situation.
Mm,
Find a reason why you're there, right? Just like,
yeah.
and doesn't sometimes I'm gonna do like the in media res
Mm,
start, so they don't need to
yeah.
have like a reason why they're on like going an
Yeah, yeah.
adventure, because like,
Mhm.
but you're gonna be like in this town, it's gonna be market day.
Yeah.
Figure out what you're there. Are you just
Yeah.
passing by, or you're like there to sell some stuff, or
Mhm.
you're there to buy something, right? Whatever, it can be like a variety of thing, which make interesting. You just need to have a reason why you're in that location at
Mhm.
that time, and then like something is gonna happen, uh, or you're going somewhere, and with maybe your group that work together already, that's defined. So now we're going somewhere to do something, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna start there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not everything has to start in the campaign when you meet for the first time. You
Mm-hmm.
can like
Yeah.
we can say, you know what, you're or maybe like maybe some of the character know each other and work
Mm-hmm.
together and already, and then they meet
Yeah.
somebody else like for the specific thing. Yeah.
Yep. Uh, Need more cowbell says an interesting thing here. Yes and no. I've played in games where the barbarian punches the king in the face because he's bored at the slow pace. You don't want to fight for
Yep.
control at the table. Yeah, you do need a to be on the same page about
Yep.
tone and setting and pace. I suppose if everyone's agreed at session 0 or in the social contract that the pacing isn't a fixed thing. It's a thing that can sometimes there will be slow scenes naturally, sometimes there will be fast scenes, and then the moment it slows down somebody's like, oh fuck this, I want combat, then that's a problem, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, and
But
I don't think that that's somebody that's bored at the slow pace, because like
mm,
a faster pace doesn't just mean like combat, but that's something that's
yeah.
bored. That's
Mm,
someone that is bored at the game, right? He's
yeah.
just there
Yeah.
to roll dice, move his mini around on the map, like you just want
Mm,
to kill people and like
mm,
fight, and now like, oh man, we haven't been in the fight in an hour. Like I'm
yeah.
fucking bored now, so I'm gonna
And
fucking do. And somebody like is not respecting the game, is not respecting the world in which it
mm,
is. He's not in the mindset of his
mm,
character.
yeah.
So that's all
And,
kind of problem. That's a player that should like maybe he's not right for your table. Like if you're
mm,
not, if you want to have like the cinematic style play, if you want to have a more serious game, those are players that need to be vetted out, right?
yeah.
If you just want to have like a beer and pretzel game
Mm,
with your buddy and stuff like that, that's fine.
and
But
I
those are like, this is disruptive player.
I find there's two specific things that run into that issue where you're more likely to run into that issue too. One is players that are coming from video games and you haven't accurately explained to them the difference between a video game RPG and a tabletop RPG, or they just don't get it still. Um, that yep, you you took the second thing out of my mouth too,
Yeah.
just a little bit though, but I think it goes even deeper than that. And they're thinking, they're not paying attention to their consequences because in video games, even if there are consequences, you just reload a save. And I think there's sort of a passive like thing with that with people playing tabletops for the first time. So
Yeah.
if that's their background, you need to explain to them, hey, you're playing with, 2, 3 or more other players. There's no reload. You're playing Iron Man mode right now.
Hmm.
Your consequences are lasting. So really think about that. Think about if you were some random, barbarian from the steppes, if you would punch this king, for what reason? I know YouTube has a character limit, so I'm not expecting you to give, all the context here, but yeah. And then second, Nemore Cowbell says it's a function of specialization. If you build a character for combat, that's what you want to do. It's also a function, though, of the game. If the game's mechanics really only tell you how to do combat and they don't have a very satisfying system of support for out of combat, it's going to make those out of combat things more boring. Yeah. Um,
Well, also if you build like a character just for combat, like you're not. Are you building a character? You're just building like a function, right? And just like you're just building.
mm,
You're like no, like it's like
that's also
the
true.
it's like the role playing like in two
Mm,
word, like or you're filling a role, or you're the tank, or you're
yeah.
the DPS guy, whatever.
Mm,
That's also like very video gamey. You don't have like a full fleshed out character. You're like,
mm,
so of course that's not gonna work with just some like a lot of style of play. It's just like more like if you just like, yeah, the beer and pretzel game. We're just there. We kick the door dungeon. We killed some stuff and stuff like that. But like then you shouldn't expect like, and those also for them, those games gonna be more tactical, because like people are concerned they're building character, right? That's in there, like, so they choose like their power that they can do. Oh, now I can do like this power mixed with
yeah.
that and do that combo and stuff like that. That's
Mm.
very like gamey sided thing, right?
And that's why I always
Like
say
board
if you're
game.
going to use a build, and I don't mind using a build, especially in crunchier systems where you can have a lot to look through, and if you don't look up build guides, it can be very easy to get lost in things. But you have to think, why does my character have this? Why is my character built for combat? Why does he live the lifestyle he does that's given him all of these abilities and things that he has, right? What is a barbarian, right, in this world? Barbarian's a very interesting class to me as an aside, because it's very often not explained why they're here, where they came from, what sort of culture allows a barbarian to come about, to exist, and that, that has to do with the classes too.
Yeah.
So I suppose we get into, in general, mechanics that do or don't support the cinematic style of playing, because I think what we're running into here is a friction with a class-based system, and friction with systems that have the vast majority of their rules on combat resolution rather than conflict
Yeah.
resolution.
And I want to say something also about the building a character for combat.
Mm,
You can have like a martial character. You can have a character that is a fighter, that is like a
mm,
soldier or whatever. That's somebody
mhm,
that is focused. Like his view of thing, like his view of resolution of conflict is to fight, right? To
mm.
violence. Like this character that think that
Yeah.
violence
Mhm.
is the answer. That can work, but it still need to be like a rational, like somewhat irrational guy,
Yeah,
right? In
if
the
you if
world,
you
if
understand
you want him to
combat very
survive.
well, you would understand that being in a king's court surrounded by,
Yeah.
yeah, intense networks of power, as Ardito says, and those networks are all guys with steel, then look around the room and understand punching this guy in the face is a really
Mm.
stupid idea right now. So, maybe there's a situation where maybe this is, some like Grima Wormtongue situation where
Yeah.
you decide, this is clearly a corrupt, and there's only one answer here. But yeah,
And
you need to understand the
and for
context.
what near Need More Cobell say, like for some discovering the way the mechanic of the system fit together in combination is very satisfying. And I can see that
Mhm.
absolutely. Like I do have an enjoyment with that as
Mhm.
well. Like I like tactical
Likewise.
stuff and
Yeah.
I like the puzzle and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
But if that's all you're into, well, you're missing a big part, in my opinion, of what a role playing game can
Mhm.
offer, making a big part of the equation.
Mm.
And even if you still want to do this to participate in this hobby, just doing that, that's fine. But then like the cinematic style is not gonna be for you. You're gonna go for a
Yeah.
tactical style, right?
Yeah.
More like
Yeah.
a yeah.
And for me, I sit sort of in the middle of them. I like the tactical side because, to me, that problem solving happens in character, because I'm a human being and I do that sort of problem solving, and it is fun, right? When you find a new, uh that's part of the excitement of martial arts. It's why I love doing it. I love, seeing a new technique or a new string of techniques and going, whoa, I've never thought about doing that before. That's really useful in this situation. If your character is a barbarian, or in general just one of these, martially focused characters, even if you're not using a class-based system, then they should be attracted to those same things, in that, they should be, figuring out those things. It should be happening in character. And again, avoiding usage, because me as a person, people in movies, anyone like that, this is something cinematics and simulation don't share. I'm not, sitting there in my class, in live sparring, announcing my moves, as I'm going, saying I use, I hit a guy in sparring and I go, I do 4 damage to you. No, I hit a guy, and then afterwards I can go, we can talk about, oh, that probably would have done a good bit of damage to you. I may have taken a finger off or something like that. Talk about it in real world terms, not terms of numerics and things like that, as much as you need to, right? At some point, we're going to have to mention the numbers, but um,
Yeah. And also like I wanted to highlight like Doc Flamingo. I think it's the first time I see you here at Doc Flamingo, so welcome. I always dealt with people like doing dumb crap like punching King in the face through realistic consequence. Crucifixions come to mind in that case. And I just like want to
mm,
say like it could happen that a character punched the King in the face.
mm,
There could be a build up that lead to that, right?
mhm.
It's just like it's a problem when it's like random coming from nowhere because the player is bored, right? Like,
Yeah.
but
Mhm,
and of course there are gonna be consequences like that. That can be interesting, right?
mhm,
But there's a way to do it in character, and not
mhm.
just like, oh, I'm so random. Like, oh, I just want to move the scene along, right? It's a
Yeah.
different thing.
Mhm.
So you want to talk about mechanics?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
kept we kept
There's a lot
derailing.
to talk about in this one already, I can tell. um, yeah, mechanics. So I think that because of the freeform nature of this, and this necessitates an ability to put aside the mechanics in favor of what makes sense in the moment. Whether that be not looking up something in the book or making up a rule that doesn't exist in the book because a character's trying to do something that just naturally happened. You know, lots of games don't have rules for wrestling or grappling and stuff like that, but plenty of times you want to grab a guy, push him off a cliff, to start
Yeah,
strangling them or whatever, instead of, in sometimes, in a more tactical game, rules is written, you'll very often see the GM say, you can't do that. There's not rules for that in this system. Whereas in a cinematic game, you would want to just make up something on the spot, roll along with it, roll flat strength, roll hand to hand, even though technically that the book says that's only, striking. I'll roll that in with grappling as well. Whatever the case may be, it's not really important. But yeah, you start to similarly run into issues with class-based systems, I think. Just because let's take Conan the Barbarian, since we're on the topic of barbarians, right? Could you make Conan in Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition as a barbarian class? Maybe, but he has so many skills that are outside of the scope of the
hmm
barbarian class in 5th edition.
yeah.
So you wouldn't really even be able to make the guy who literally has barbarian in his title in a class-based system in this case, at least this particular example. I don't want to get into the weeds and run through every single class-based system that has a barbarian, but yeah. So, I mean, he's like a barbarian rogue fighter. And at the
Yeah.
point that you're dipping into like 3 multi-classing and dealing with a bunch of stuff, mm, are you
Now you're
playing?
really in the character build too.
Yeah. Are you?
Okay. Yeah. But you talk about class-based system, and it's also like I think it depends on a lot of the modern edition of D&D, for example, like in
Mm,
Pathfinder and stuff like that. A
mm,
lot of like they with the class often comes like power that you can
mm,
activate, and I
mm,
think that's also like complexify the system a lot. And oftentimes like because that's something like with when I'm writing like my game, which is now called Bastard Sword, by the way, in case you didn't hear. People I don't. That's because like that's one thing I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see if we can have like a game with that's a little more on the crunchy side, but where the crunch works with the role play and the cinematic role play instead of like working against it, right? And I think a big part of that, what I'm trying to do is like to have like the name of the different mechanics that you activate blend in with natural language. So if you say like I'm taking a
mm,
step
mm,
forward and then I grab the guy and I skewer him with my dagger, those are all like a bunch of mechanics that you
mm,
activate, but like it form like a more like a sentence that you see it's depicted it describe basically what you're doing, and you can always picture in your head much more than if you say, "Oh, I'm using my free of the small." I'm doing a reckless attack,
yeah.
or I'm doing like like all those like those terms that are very mechanical, those
Mm,
parts that you activate.
yeah.
Um, so I think there's that as well, like the that often get in the way. And when you have a lot of them, and every class has them, and then you have to go look in the book. Oh, what exactly is it? And then there's like those condition, then when you can use it and when you can't, and stuff like that. Like that will
Mm,
take you out oftentimes. That oftentimes will very take you out of the game, right?
yeah. Let's look at comments here because the comments are moving very quickly, and yeah, I agree with all that. Um, let's see. So I'll just go in order here. Doc Flamingo says the thing
Yeah.
is, even for a highly martial character or party, the actual fighting secondary to the game narrative. Autocorrect. Robert E. Howard was a master of the action sequence exactly because he minimized it.
Yes.
Yes, and he practiced boxing, which is maybe the most minimal martial art that's out there. It cuts away everything but punching and position. So I think he had a very good understanding of how fights worked as well, which helped
And
with
that's
the.
why I'm a big fan of like Howard's writing. Like I
Mm,
love those Conan story because like the
mm,
action is so punchy and
mm,
so dynamic.
mm.
It's resolved so quickly. It
Yeah.
doesn't dwell on it. Like yeah, it
And
doesn't describe like every fucking thing, but you get the vibe of it. You get the feel of it.
mm,
It
eh,
feel the action scene feel action even when you read them,
yeah.
right?
I would add though, the fighting can be it shouldn't necessarily be secondary to the narrative. It should be part of the narrative. The fighting should
Yes.
be happening because the characters are angry at this other character, or because these characters have different goals that they can't come to a non-violent solution about.
And
They
you
Yeah.
I
So
think that's also like a big failing oftentimes of those crunchy system,
mhm,
because you're gonna if you have like round after round where the situation doesn't change,
mhm,
that becomes very boring. Like the fight should be dramatic. Like every round, the situation should change somehow
and it's
and in a
mm,
measurable way. Like if it's just like, well, no, like, I have like 5% less hit point, right?
yeah.
That's not like a very like you don't feel that change really, right?
Mhm, yeah.
But like the position should change, the
The
like movement,
position's
the
not
upper end
changing, is
should
it? It's
change. Mhm.
exactly on
Yeah,
the statement of boxing.
yeah,
The look at a boxing match and look at a game of Dungeons and Dragons, any edition, because they all
yeah,
have this problem. In a boxing match, how often do both boxers stay in the same 5-foot square and just trade blows at each other?
yeah,
Almost never. But in almost every single game of D&D combat, what happens when two martial characters meet in the middle? They just stand there and go
yeah.
until one of them has fewer hit points than the other. And maybe if if it's being run intelligently, if the characters are being played intelligently, one of them sees, "Oh, I'm dying, I'm losing this fight, I'm going to run away." But even that doesn't happen very often. So there's a
And
mechanical issue that needs to be addressed for
yeah, and
making
that's one thing like I'm trying to address as well. Like that's why like in Bastard
mm,
Sword I have like those
yeah,
different range of weapon, and the initiative is dynamic and stuff like that, because like
mhm,
now like
yeah, yeah.
okay, now like I stagger the guy. Now like I'm gonna act first on the next round. I'm gonna have the advantage in that sense. Or now like I mean like we have different length weapon. Now I'm in the range of his. He's not in the range of mine. But now like I managed to overcome that and change. But I think if you like look at a typical game of D&D, even if you don't use the miniature and the pugs or whatever, the
Mm,
battle map, right? Because that like it's exacerbate the problem, I think. But even if they don't use that, if they don't like they stick like theater of the mind, look at the end of like let's say like round 3 and at the end of round 4 and ask
mm,
yourself what changed. And if like everything is the same except like the number of hit points is, or from some people is is slightly smaller, you know, you just like wasted a round. Like it's a round that nothing
mm,
happened, right? And
mm.
that happened a lot.
Yeah. Uh, Jump here. I think that moving in and out of combat is assumed in a fight scene. I made a video on exactly that
Yeah.
a month or two ago. Be a And yes, I think it's a huge improvement to your combat scenes if you are describing, even if your character doesn't take the move action
Mm.
into a different square. If you are describing, your character takes a little step, not a full, they're not running or walking over to somewhere else, but they're dodging, they're weaving. But too often it's just like two dudes, Don Fry versus Suzuki, just
Yeah.
sitting there in the clinch and trading right hands at each other.
And I think a big part of the problem with that is like the way that the hit point works, right? Are
Mhm,
supposed to simulate like, oh, now
mhm.
you're like your stamina, your fatigue, and your like
Energy.
your I guess you get exhausted, and now like now you're gonna get killed, right? Because that's what should be in the fight, especially in the fight with weapons stuff like that. It's like you struggle to have one good hit, and then one
Mm,
good hit would end the fight, right?
mm,
That's what we should see, right? So maybe sometimes you're gonna have small minor cuts and stuff like that, sometimes, and you keep fighting, but it should all be about position and about landing this one good blow.
yep.
There should be a struggle there that we don't feel with hit point. You
Mm,
just feel like we're chipping away, chip away, right, at the big bag of hit point. It
yeah,
doesn't
because
convey properly like the cinematic feel.
because and lots of times it's because people don't until the thing that kills you, they don't describe what losing hit points are, or even when they do describe what losing hit points are, the player doesn't play it effectively. They get stabbed and the guy goes, "Ow, I've been stabbed," and it's like no one
Well,
reacts. Right?
but you can
So,
blame them because like you got like hundreds of hit point, right? And then oh
yeah,
you
yeah.
lose 10 hit
So
point. I say, how do you replay that? Like stub my toe, right? Just like oh you're fighting and then like in the process, like it's just
yeah,
like
Yeah, I've got a bruise or something. I think I like Shauna and I
There's no
came to the
there,
conclusion that hit points should
yeah,
probably represent fatigue. You know, you're getting hit, you're
yeah,
getting the wind knocked out of you, you
yeah.
know, that's a near miss. You really had to, you know, throw
But
throw your back
even
into it,
then,
you know.
there's no impact on mechanics either. So you just like it doesn't feel like you're suffering anything, right? They're just
I
there
guess
to you're just like a
the
big buffer, and
yeah,
until you
yeah.
reach zero,
I
they
guess
mean
the
nothing.
impact on mechanics can be thought of as I have one fewer round one less round that I can stay in the combat.
Yeah,
Um, that so
I
it's
think
like an
that's too
inverse
abstract.
mechanic. Yeah, it's
Yes.
but yeah. um uh yes, and this is another uh part of the issue with sort of the first
Mm,
generation role playing games is
yeah.
that they have a lot of subsystems, and I think the transition between the subsystems can be very jarring, in the way that rather than looking cinematic, it looks more like a stage play. And when you go from combat to not combat, which is usually the two, you know, big subsystems that we can look
Mm,
at. We have combat and we have some skills that resolve everything else in Dungeons and Dragons, for example.
yeah.
Um, it can feel a lot like people are, you know, moving around the settings on the play, and that I don't like plays for that reason. That like takes me totally. I can't suspend my disbelief very well when watching a play, uh, when they're doing a lot of, you know, set changing and stuff like that. Whereas in a movie, it's all hidden, right? It's all hidden. You don't see the cameras. Ideally, you don't see. They don't stop to, you know, go give directing advice, and you know, you could watch a director's cut if you wanted all of that, but
Yeah, but about those two mode, I think like that's a big part of like having the cinematic feel when you're playing, right? Is not to go in a different mode. Like it should like, and you were talking about play and movie and stuff like that, and we like sometimes like, and you are HEMA guy, right? Sometimes you look at you can look at fight in TV show or in movie and stuff like that. And I'm sure you're gonna say like, man, that's fucking crap fight, right? But we have to understand that the point of the fight in TV show in a movie is to tell a story. It's not to like the drama is the point. It's not like to show
yeah,
specific
yeah.
good technique, right?
Doesn't need more cowbells. So fighting at Agincourt is a real thing. It just isn't a fun thing to do for hours. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's
and what Doc Flamingo was saying here too, like with low cap HP, high letality combat, way to go in my view. I think that helps a lot already because you need to if your life is not on the line
mm,
every fucking round, basically,
mm.
you're wasting your time, in my opinion. You know, you should
Yeah, why are you what's the purpose of spending the first 4 rounds of a 5-round combat
yeah.
when eventually the 5th round of combat is where you make the real meaningful decisions? And it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you know,
And
I
that's
mean,
also
yeah.
why I like Death Spiral, right? Because now
Yeah,
even if you're not
uh-huh,
gonna die on the first round,
yeah,
now you engage on the Death Spiral and stuff like that. So now like, well, now things move. Now like maybe it's time to make different decision.
mm,
Maybe it's time to run away. Maybe it's time to
mm,
surrender, right? There's like
yep,
it's not like, well, we'll see what happened in 5 round and then we'll make a decision
mm,
there, right? Just like
yep,
then cut that those fucking first
yeah.
fucking 4 round. Like
Now, uh, unlike movies, a thing where I think the cinematic play differs from movies is you need to inform people when something is going to be high lethality.
yeah.
It can be, um, and of course, if your players are reading the rules and the rules are like very clearly like, oh yeah, I can die super easily, then great. But if you're doing stuff on your end to just make stuff do way more damage than the rules inform the players, that can be a problem where they're just like, what the hell? I just died out of nowhere. Why did I even make this character? I showed up to die in the first 30 minutes. Whereas you can pull a twist in a movie, right? And make, you know, and kill characters suddenly. Even then it's kind of a cheap thrill, but you know, if you're not George R. R. Martining it and doing it to every other character all the time, you can get away with it in movies and shows where you can't um in a tabletop, right? Um uh Oh god. Dice Tales. If you could show
I
me
know
how the
that's it.
Romans exchanged ranks in combat and prove it from the historical record, I will use your RPG combat rules until I die. If anyone can show me solo fighting techniques from before I-13. I would love that.
Oh, there's one actually from the Roman time, but it's for
Oh
gladiatorial
yeah,
combat.
the like the tiny fragment of that wrestling
Yeah,
manual. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, it's Charlotte. Hey Charlotte. Cool. Um
Oh, hello, Charlotte. New channel. Oh,
yeah.
are you putting content on it? I'll need to look it up.
Yeah.
And I saw your name like lately on another like Dragon Shadow. I saw your name on another stream. I didn't know it was Charlotte.
Yeah. Sweet.
Yeah.
We've got lots of comments about mass combat in here, which I think is interesting. Not something I
Yes.
planned on talking about, but we've got enough comments about it to mention it. So, Dragon Shadow, Charlotte points out, do you suppose scale can play a factor in cinematic combat, or would it be more of a set piece? And I'll read through some more before we give our opinions. If I'm in a pike formation, I'm not going anywhere because my own formation was created to limit my ability to retreat. Also true.
Yeah.
And then again, yeah, Dice Tales mentioning mass combat as another thing.
Yeah.
So I guess the my take on that, pipe formation would be more of a simulationist thing, right? There aren't too many movies where you are focusing on one dude in the middle of a pike formation,
Mhm.
because there's not, and even in our historical reenactment stuff, we don't tend to reenact pike blocks because they're really boring to do, even though that would have been the vast majority of what was done. But
Yeah.
you want to have some guy come out for free in full kit, and it's like, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to stand and hold a stick straight out and sometimes lift it up, and maybe if you're lucky you'll get to draw a sword.
And
Whoa.
that's the reason also why pike formation were so popular, because like it require much less training, because
Yep.
you have it's not you don't have much choice to do. You know,
Yeah.
like hold your fucking stick and don't run.
Yeah. Don't poke your friend in the back,
Yeah.
it's like yeah. um so there's that. And
So they're like the
but as
opposite
far
of like
as
heroic kind of
yeah.
fighting, right? They're like it's like very like it's mass combat, right? You're not an
Hmm.
individual like
Hmm.
demarking yourself. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
fun
that's
spirited, yeah.
that would be my take on it, right? I
Mm.
always felt like like we talk about mass combat, and it depends where the character are. If the character is in the pike formation
Mhm.
or in a phalanx, like inside the phalanx, that can be very different than if it's like commander from outside, right? And
Mm.
trying to coordinate, like if you're like a centurion
Yeah.
trying to coordinate your legion, whatever
Mm.
your that can be very different, because now you can have element of role play if you have like power play inside the command tent and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
different people with different opinion and different like
You gotta,
each
like, it would be
controlling their legion, and right.
it would be awesome to play like a Langsnick the baggage train, and you've got, you're playing a party of maybe the fighting men, but you've got, 30, 40 NPCs that follow you around that you rely on for food, tailoring, medical stuff, and that sort of thing. And then you get into combat. Maybe, it would be interesting to have the mass combat happen in an inconvenient location where, yeah, you do need to get these guys who shouldn't be fighting to be fighting, but would it be interesting to, tally up each individual, maid and washerwoman's hit points and say assign them, full on character sheets?
No,
Maybe not necessarily, right?
but that's also like I think like a mass combat, like like they're more like in the war game field than the role playing game
Mhm.
field, because the role
Yeah,
playing game field was supposed to
yeah,
focus on a character, on an
mm,
individual, right?
yeah,
And when you're going mass combat,
yeah,
you're basically like letting your individuality behind, right? So it's
mm,
different thing, and like
yeah,
wargaming can be a great hobby in itself,
yeah,
and you can try to mix both, but you have to
mm,
understand like, well, now we know we're gonna let the role playing behind and go in the mass combat stuff, and we're gonna do a lot of like a simulation and stuff like that, and
mm,
move troops around and stuff like that.
mm.
It's a different kind of vibe, right? You can do it in a role playing session once in a while, like for some
Yeah.
reason your character has ended up in a mass combat,
I think
but it's hard
in
to get.
I
Hmm?
think in general, the mass combat, if you are in a more cinematic way, even if you're doing it simulationist, you can still do it simulationist while keeping zoomed in on the single character or single characters that are the players. But you can't treat each individual of the thousands of people in the
No.
mass combat as their own stat blocks. You need to treat them more as obstacles than
Well,
you almost need to treat it as a non-combat scenario, right? If you think of the same way you would treat
yeah.
a wall of arrows, a trap that somebody would set off. You don't go into a combat mode in Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm just using Dungeons and Dragons as a consistent example here to not get stuck in. Same thing, that the arrows shoot, that's a thing. There's a bunch of dudes shooting arrows. I don't need you to whack away at this even more monstrously huge bag of hit points here as if we're in a combat. Again, it's important to know what the goal is. When there's a big mass combat, Kingdom of Heaven, I rewatched recently. There's big mass combat in that movie. What's the goal of that mass combat? Well, there's a few. The first one is to slow them down so that they can get inside the walls of Jerusalem. The second one is so that they can get the civilians, the women and children, to flee from Jerusalem and just defend it as long as possible. So the focus should be on the goal, right? Their focus isn't on chipping a Saracen dies here and there. They're not focusing specifically on, this arrow did 3 damage to one of 10,000 Saracens and they each have 8 hit points. You're going to be there for forever. And that's why we see these 4-hour-long combats where 2
Yeah.
hours in, nobody even remembers why they're having the combat in the first place.
Yeah. Nobody pay attention anymore. But I like what Dice still says here too. Like, oh fuck, I lost it. Oh, it's more fun playing in the front rank of the formation opposing the phalanx. That could be an interesting thing as well. Like if you have like this mass formation, but not like a different kind of like vibe, and you're just like a ragtag group of people, where like with this phalanx advancing over you, that can be an interesting part as well. But oh yeah, I remember what I wanted to say. The problem with this mass combat is like role playing game is a lot about player agency and making choice, right?
Yeah.
And when you go into those mass combat, mass formations, stuff like that, this is reduced quite a bit, right? Role playing games about like me, it's about like I love making choice for your character, thinking about what your character is gonna do and stuff like that, how you'd react, how you'd act. But now like this choice is made for you because in the formation, like now you have like the choice of, well, do I do what my formation is commanded to do and just advance holding my stick forward, or do I route, right? And that's not it's not a real choice, right? It's not a real option. So now
But
you're
if you
just
have
gonna be there round after round doing the
yeah,
same thing, making your roll. Next
but if
round,
you have
same thing.
decisions like, there's an army, marching around to, cut off a supply line or going to, attack this, innocent civilian that's over here. And, these are just random raiders that you're trying to defend this town from. And you have an option of, put yourself in a really bad position to defend whatever this objective is, or stay here in a more strategic position and fight. Well, now we're combining the what's tactically intelligent and what's morally correct for the characters.
But
Now we have a character
that's what I'm
decision
saying.
to make.
It's more
Yeah.
interesting if you
Yeah.
have the player in command
Uh-huh.
position, and the
Yeah.
flamingo is saying the same thing here. Like player
Yeah.
should be leading unit in RPG mass
Yeah.
combat,
Yeah.
right? And then now you have like different character, like each
Yeah.
leading their units. Maybe you have like a top guy, and the top guy maybe is ruthless, and he's saying, "Oh, let the fucking villager be burned, right? We need
Yeah.
to hold this fort." And then you say, "No, I'm gonna fucking take my raider and go defend the villager, right?
Yeah.
What's good protecting the fort if just like if the people die, right?" So now you have
Yeah.
like those interaction that are interesting and are dramatic, but the
And then you
combat
can
is the piece are not just like played turn after turn after turn, right? You're
Yeah.
just like, okay, we send the raider, and then later on, like you hear like somebody come in. Now you have like some fighting between the commander and then somebody come in. Oh, the raider fucking like managed to save the half the village, right? Whatever. Just and then you go to the next thing happening. Sorry, I tapped on my desk.
Yep. But yeah, it should be it's mass combat is I think the consideration there is why, one, as always, as with any combat, why is it happening? What are the issues that are arising, not just to lead to it, but because of it? And consider that being a random lineman is not
Yeah.
particularly interesting. So
And if
yeah.
we think of movies, right? Because
Mm.
like we're talking about cinematic play. How with a mass battle, a big battle, is solved in the movie, right? You're gonna see like the
Mm.
troops getting on the
Yeah.
line, some context, maybe some shot of fighting here
Mm.
and there, and then the result, right? It's resolved very quickly. It's waved off oftentimes. You have some movie where like you know what I'm gonna say it like I'm not a big fan of the Lord of the Ring movie. The fucking Battle of Elm Deep, like I was getting my ass my like fucking bored watching that. It was like, who the fuck cares? It's a big battle. We get it.
Yeah.
Like just fucking move on, right? Just like
Yeah.
I don't fucking care. Like seeing like Legolas like surf down a stair on a
No,
shield
that
and
was
like
so stupid.
kill
Uh,
yeah, kill orc
uh,
after orc after orc, right?
yeah.
Just fucking move on with it at some
Yeah.
point. I get it, it's a big fight.
Yeah. Hmm.
You don't have
Um,
to
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with the Battle of Helm's Deep is what Iron Man mentions here, which is the GM should have an interesting sideshow to the battle that's fought by the characters, the dragon, the sneaky
yeah,
assassination attempt, etc. And there
yeah,
wasn't any of that.
that's a good point.
It was very one to one. It was just here's the battle happening, that's
Yeah,
it. And I think in the best mass combats in cinema, there's either like an interesting ceasefire and a parlay that breaks up the action with something, or yeah, there is somebody sneaking around in the chaos and goes and assassinates one of the lieutenants or someone just out of nowhere, or even something as simple as a straight arrow hits a bystander and you're like, oh
yeah.
crap, it was
And I want to say also like from what Armin says that as well. Like the mass battle can be the backdrop, and
Mhm.
while the mass battle happen, like that's you send the character do something else, and your elite group, elite unit that you're not gonna be in the fucking like on the front line, but while the battle happen, go in the back and try to sabotage their baggage train, or go in the
Mm.
back, go like go do something else, like while the army is distracted, while like all this fighting happen. Now is your chance to accomplish some other goal, right? That could be interesting as well. That
Mhm.
could be an interesting way to or give them a specific goal. Like there's the battle is gonna happen around you, just fucking ignore it. You try to cut straight through and reach that
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
guy, right?
Yeah. And if you
Whatever.
get stuck in, it's very clear that, even though you
Yeah,
are probably way stronger, uh, you know, uh, saw this happening in real life, if to again throw a coin to simulationists, uh yeah, you've got the most advanced weaponry of the time. If you get surrounded by 10 dudes and they're just dogpiling you, you're stuck in the press,
yeah,
you're no longer in a, so make sure, and you can do that with show and not tell, which is something that kind of sounds, uh, at first it sounds like, well, how do you show and not tell in a tabletop RPG, which is mostly an oral medium? Um, but you don't necessarily have to sit there and say, well, your character would know that that's a stupid idea because
yeah.
so you don't want to get stuck in. You don't have to start being a director, not sort of
I guess
that
when
cinema,
what we
but
say when we say
yeah.
like show don't tell in the
Mm,
RPG, in the context of RPG, is like you show with what's happening in the world, what the
yeah,
NPC
yeah,
does, the event that happens, stuff like that. You don't tell as the GM to your player, right?
yeah.
The GM
So
with the GM
yeah.
tells the players what's happening in the world, what the character, what the NPC does, what's happening, like the random event of the world, the
Mhm,
weather, the like
yeah,
the scenery, stuff like that.
yeah.
You don't tell them what their character think. You don't tell them what's a good idea or
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah, so if you wanted to inform them that, hey, it's kind of a bad idea to just wade into the mass combat and get stuck in, even if you're really good at fighting, you could show somebody, with, modern military stuff. You got somebody with a bunch of, badges, cool patches. He's maybe from an elite military band. He's getting stuck in a trench and, tossing grenades out. And all of a sudden he's stuck there. There's so much machine gun fire going overhead that he can't get out. He's just stuck. He's flashing guys like a thumbs down, like, don't go over here. You don't have to say anything as GM. The players can make up their mind if they think it's a great idea to go over there and help that guy, even though he's in a crap position, or if they go, right, he's got him distracted over there, I'm going to go somewhere else, and then we're not going to get bogged down in this big 4 hour, trench combat.
Yeah. And there's another thing I wanted to talk about too, because we talk about cinematic role play, we talk about thinking of a movie and stuff like that. Movie changed a lot
Yeah. Yes.
in the last few decades, right?
Yeah. Saying his cinematic role play is as broad as, well,
Yeah.
cinematics, I suppose.
I don't watch much movie anymore because like
Me
I
neither.
fucking hate them. I fucking hate modern movie. I cannot fucking stand those like Disney Marvel movie shit, right? It's all we got now almost like, or it's like Disney Star Wars movie. They're stupid. Sorry, I don't want to insult anybody. Like if you like them, like whatever. But they're like their movie. You gotta sit there and turn your brain off. Like like you turn you're like
Yeah.
I'm not interested in that, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's this consideration as well. Like people like think like if you take cinematic role play to mean well, it's gonna be a big blue light flash like going off in the sky, like big blue
Yeah.
beam like shooting into the sky, and then you have like to punch people until you get to the beam and then punch some more people. Well,
Yeah.
that's what I don't think that's what we're talking about, right?
Mm,
Although
yeah.
like technically you could say it's cinematic because that's what our movie are done now, but
Mm,
that's what those fucking movies sucks, right?
yeah.
Like if you look at movie like I don't know, like Pulp Fiction or like even the
Mm,
older movie, like you
mm,
can look at I don't know, like the Taxi Driver, right?
mm,
Those old movie, like the pacing of the scene was much different. You still had this dialogue. The dialogue was
yeah.
interesting. The dialogue was building something. Like a
Mm,
line was there for a reason. It wasn't just
yeah.
like mindless chit chat. Not like
And
this.
even if you look at like a super action heavy movie like the first John Wick, all of the dialogue and the non-action scenes that are there are telling you something about the world. They're telling you something about the characters. They're
Yeah,
it's not just mindless action. Whereas, yeah, you look at these Marvel movies and it's like, what's the dialogue? It's funny quip, haha,
yeah.
let's go do
And
this.
there and
No.
the character are out of character, just like making joke that are self-referential,
Yeah,
that are out of nowhere,
and
that
even
any character could have said because they're like it's just like the funny quirk that has been to be said now,
yeah,
so we just give it this guy or
and every
this girl.
character is like that, right?
Yep,
It's not
yep,
if your character is, say if you're role playing Spider-Man, just for an example, yeah, you should have, some funny one-liners, there should be some quippiness there. That's the character, right? He sort of doesn't take things seriously, even in life or death situations. Although he does even do that when it comes down to it. But if everyone in the party is all playing this jokey character, your tone's going to go way off of what is probably intended.
yeah. So I guess like when you if we talk about I just wanted to throw that in because if we talk about like cinematic play, we kind of need to quit the new step. Yeah, if we want to talk about a cinematic play, I guess like we kind of like make the expectation of what kind of cinema we're talking about. Uh, so there's that as well. Like I just wanted to make a little aside there.
If I don't laugh, you catch a stray arrow. I mean, maybe that's I think that can work occasionally, actually, that you'd say something like so mind-bogglingly stupid, the guy stops for a second before he bashes your brains in just to consider it. But um,
Yeah,
yeah, and again, if you're yeah, exactly. They kind of have just turned all the Marvel characters into lame derivatives of Spider-Man,
yeah,
except for Spider-Man. Uh, Tangent though, that's something you would discuss in your session 0 is we're doing it cinematic. Okay, what kind of in with the tone, the you can have like um have a watch list, have
yeah.
or a reading guide or what have you, and you don't have to have your players be watching, before we play our 4 hour one shot, I need you to watch 20 hours of movies or something, but watch clips from it, watch,
But
see,
also like all of those
you
movie
know,
people would have seen, right?
yeah,
So like,
exactly,
hopefully,
yeah, but to
yeah,
get the tone down, right, you're going because if you just say we're doing sci-fi thriller, that might be different if you're running Blade Runner or if you're running Alien. So
Yeah.
you can get into more specifics of that. And there are also cultural differences. When you say cinematic, do you mean anime? What kind of anime? Because there's some anime that takes itself quite seriously, and I think it's really well written. And then there's some anime that is just like gonzo nonsense. It's 8 million episodes and 5 of them matter. So,
Yeah.
a lot of times an anime will just have combat scenes for the sake of it. So yeah, I think it's important to get what exactly do you mean? What cinema are we talking about?
Yeah.
Mm,
And also like one thing I one thing I want to say, and you can give me your opinion on that.
mm,
I don't think that cinematic play or style does not mean rule of cool running amok, right?
mm-hmm.
Like, and that goes back to Legolas surfing on a shield, right? That was fucking stupid. You know, that's not what I mean by
I
cinematic play,
I
right?
really like what Rick from 28mm RPG said, which is if it makes the audience groan,
Yeah,
then it's a sign that it's it's bad. And
yeah,
that was a thing that personally it made us too. If we're the audience, it made us groan. So
yeah.
I like most of the rest of the Lord of the Rings movie adaptations, but yeah, that scene I tried to wipe it from my memory every time I see it, and um, and that's part of the thing, right? I think there's elements of Rule of Cool which I enjoy. The idea of player interjection, the idea that a
Yep.
player can say, you've described like a palatial building. You didn't say that there was a chandelier in here, but I'm going to assume there's a chandelier. I'm going to grab the chandelier
Mhm.
and swing from it and kick a guy in the chest across the banquet table or whatever. I
Although
pick up a chair, even though you didn't describe a chair, and start using it to beat somebody over the head.
for the
Okay.
chandelier, like
Mm.
I need to stress because I've talked about that a lot. Describe how the scene is lit, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you didn't say there was a chandelier, like did you say how the room was lit, right? It's like that impact a lot, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's an
Uh,
that's an aside there.
If you're,
But yeah,
but my problem with Rule of Cool comes when you're in some prison cell and you start swinging from the chandelier. Why is there a chandelier in your prison? Oh, because it would be cool. Well, no, it's not cool. It's stupid, right? It's, to me, cool is one, kind of an empty term like fun. It's kind of meaningless. And
yeah,
two, to me, it's way more interesting to use the tools at your disposal and use the tools that would make sense to be at your disposal.
yeah. Because
And you're
for me, what it's cool is when the scene makes sense and when you can immerse yourself and believe in what's happening, right? And that's also like, well, like you say, like, oh, Neil Corbell say we are showing our age. Heroic Fantasy is
I'm
just
only
about about CGI
26.
combat. Yeah. But that's the thing. I'm not a big fan of like wushu, right? I don't want
Yes.
wushu in my game. If you say like, oh, I jump up and I land on this blade, right? No, you know, that's not like a
Yeah.
John Woo movie, right? That's not gonna
Unless,
happen
yeah, yeah. And that would be, part of the
unless like in
session
the
zero
setting and
is
stuff
that,
like
yeah,
that, right? Unless that's the tone you're going for, right? That's
yeah.
fair. But for most game, that would be like beyond. If
Mm,
you're just like doing like a medieval fantasy kind of game, right? Like a kind of low fantasy, whatever, and
yeah,
then you
yeah,
you you, you say like I'm doing something like that, or like oh I lift the chair up with my feet and then I kick it so it land in the face of the guy. I say like,
yeah.
well, you're pushing a bit now.
and
Okay,
that's
you can
and that's
try.
something I still struggle with, right? Because I just necessarily know more things about medieval fighting than your average person, and so if somebody's going to try something, and I need to, as a GM, interpret what they're attempting in good faith. And
Yeah,
oh, they didn't. Okay, this guy's trying to stab somebody straight through full plate with a longsword or something.
just looking for the gap.
Yeah, their character is more intelligent in melee combat than they are. I'll throw them that bone, right? Yeah, I
Yeah,
understand what you're trying to attempt here. But at the same time, yeah, it irks me to no end when people are, if people are going off of movies they've seen in the cinematic style, and they're doing things like casting what is apparently a steel sword, or they're doing something, uh another Lord of the Ringsism, damn it. And although it
Conan
was
is
the
guilty
orcs,
of that as well.
it was the orcs, so I guess I can pass that. I can pass that they're using some horrific, cast iron
Iron
blade that's gonna
sword.
shatter on somebody's head. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't want to get broken off into discussions of, well, that doesn't make any sense, dude. You're gonna stat and then pull up a video of how plate actually works from like Todd's workshop or something like that, and just
Yeah.
totally take everybody out of it.
No, because that would be go against like the first thing we talk about, which
Yeah,
is about like
pacing. Yep.
pacing.
Hmm.
Exactly. I think that's the most important thing. Like
Yeah.
pacing, keeping like cutting, trimming the fat, keeping the thing making sense. I think that's what's when and focusing on what's dramatic, what's interesting, right? You can have like
Mm,
those, or you can have those scenes that will be like more quiet. Like not everything has to be like oh, now it's gonna be like a turning point, because that's
mm,
also becomes silly. But you have like those scene of character building. If no character is built, like like now you're just wasting your time, right?
yeah.
If you want to do a lot in your game, you have to know when to move on, right? That's
Yeah.
when to.
And it ties back into show don't tell as well, right? Because instead of, telling your players that wouldn't work, here's why it wouldn't work, here's how the physics, going into you opening your PowerPoint presentation as if you're a college lecturer, you can just show that it doesn't work, despite your best efforts, the sword, it sort of sticks in, but it doesn't go all the way through, or it glances off of their haute piece, or whatever, describe that that's not working here, and then maybe you could show another character that is using the correct tactics, although you don't always want to have an NPC that's just there to one up the player characters. That can get
Yeah.
annoying and preachy, but you can yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, because like Dr. Flamingo say best movie scene
Yeah.
ever. Original Three Musketeer. Michael York enters a room full of guards, try to yank the carpet, tears the fringe off, and runs. They just look at each other confused. And that can be like when a player try to do something that is silly.
Yeah. Mm,
That's one thing you can like. It's if you want like it's one correction you can do, right? It's just like,
mm.
well, I'm pulling,
Yeah.
I'm lift the carpet, and I try to yank it for to have the guard fall. Well, the fringe of the carpet like rip into your hand, right? And just like,
Yeah. And it doesn't fully punish the player for attempting that, because
no.
one, it's a realistic reaction too. When people do weird stuff, do people, even trained guards, immediately snap and go into combat mode to apprehend? No, they turn around, they look, and they're like, "What the hell is
Oh,
going on? What was that?"
and you know,
If the you know,
because we talk about pacing and stuff like that, like we can talk about like if you like that's kind of like a bit of a tangent show, but I think it's linked to the topic now,
hmm
and make me
hmm
this comment make me think of that about like the speed of your turn
mm,
and all the like sometimes we say like always be initiative, always go on a table. Like I don't necessarily do that because like
mm,
if your character say okay I'm gonna go dig a latrine whatever, right?
mm,
Just like that's gonna take you a little time.
mm,
You're gonna go do that. I'll come
mhm.
back to you if you're interrupted or when you're done. But in the
Mm,
meantime, I'm
yep.
gonna go like to other like people, like do other people around, and I assume that you're just like digging your role until like something until you're done, right? And then I'm gonna say, okay, John, now what you're doing now, like I just like
Yeah.
or not a ask question, but I'm just say like, well, like I say, oh yeah, I say, well, I don't know why I say like dig a latrine, right? The latrine is done digging. You had a big pile of dirt on the side, whatever.
Somebody goes to get a drink of water in a movie, they don't show the guy going to get a drink of water. They focus on the characters that are doing something more pressing. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like well, often
Yeah.
if you do go to get a drink of water in the movie, it's just a reason to get the character out of the scene, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or somewhere else. Anyway.
Yeah.
But and that's the thing too with if you want you want if you want to keep to preserve the pacing, you want your players to every time it's their turn, they tell you what their character does, right? They tell you an action that they do, right? There's no question being asked and stuff like that because that slow down the game quite a bit. And you don't want them necessarily like to give you like five action they're doing. They tell you one thing, right? And then you go around the table and everybody tell you what they're doing, and then you narrate what's happening, right? The result of those action.
Mm.
And there's also like a, and for that you need a lot of trust between the player, because if you for and you need to build that trust by not forgetting them, right?
This
If
is a
you
very
if you
high
if
trust style, I would
yeah
say
if
in general.
yeah if you always go between, like, you have four players on the table and one is kind of left on the side and you never come back to him, and like the other character get to do something, then you're gonna come back to that guy. He'll want to like three or four action, right? He's
Mm,
gonna do a lot because, like, well, no, like you did all this stuff with the other guy and I didn't get to do anything. My character was just like what, standing there doing nothing.
mhm,
Like my action was resolved, finished, and stuff like that.
mm,
So that's a good when you're a GM. Make sure you don't forget a character, so now they
mm.
don't feel obliged to tell you a lot when it's their turn. So it just like
And
give you one action and then you move on.
likewise, if you're the players, don't be afraid to interrupt when another person's scene is dragging on for too long. You know, go, oh, I got done. I come
Yeah,
back to the
that's
fireplace and
something
see
a
what's
bit
going on.
problematic when you play
Right?
online, especially because of
Mm,
the way the microphone technology, stuff like that.
mhm,
Now you try to be like more careful with that.
mm,
But the other thing I wanted to say is like sometime one thing that can be developed that is very good for pacing is how would I say, like rhythm, in a sense, like like if the GM, if like the character are doing something and the GM say the door burst open, right? That's a very short action.
mm.
Now the player get to react to that because they don't know
Yeah,
what's happening, right?
it's equal and opposite reaction almost,
Exactly. So now,
right?
like,
Like if the
the
door
door
bursts
burst
open,
open.
you
Now
don't.
you get to react. You don't get to react. Say, "Oh, okay, I turn around and I go run." No, no, you turn around. Like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I turn around."
yeah,
Then you gave me as much as I gave you, so now I can give you more. There's a guard standing there with a rapier in his hand.
yeah,
Now you get to act, right?
yeah,
But keep your reaction short, right? Just like so. Then you can have like this back and forth and have like the spacing, like
and mm,
thing that happened, like shot
and
in movie, right? You
yeah, and with the trust, that brings up something very interesting. I want to go to Arman's comment from earlier. Can a game go
oh
from
yeah,
one style to another? Realm management not in character, for example. It absolutely can, and I think
yeah,
it can do even more than this. Like you can run, and I run a game like Pathfinder, which is usually this very tactical, crunchy. You don't see it role played almost at all because you have all these feats and used abilities that we were talking about earlier. But I trust you as a player to, in a situation like that, if you have the feat quick draw, I don't need you to tell me, and I don't even want you to tell me, you know, because I have the quick draw feat, I can
yeah,
draw my, dagger really quickly and, throw it at him right away. No, I trust that you understand how your character works and the abilities your character has. And you just turn around, Conan, enough talk, and just fling the dagger at the guy immediately as he rounds the corner, or whatever. Um, you
yeah,
know, because you know what you can do. And if you're cheating, whatever. If you're cheating to the point where it becomes obvious, then it'll break the sort of cinematic flow of things. If you're and you can see that in you know um a lot of terrible anime where the characters get, new powers out of nowhere all the time. It feels like the characters are cheating, nothing's explained, you're like, what the hell? This character, especially old 60s stuff, like Golden Bat. I don't know if anyone knows that, where it's just
nope,
he has a new it's an old 60s superhero anime where it's just every single episode he's got a new power that's never explained. Maybe he doesn't even have that power. That's sort of cheating, right? That's going to break
yeah.
the
Superman used to be like that.
yeah, yeah,
He
exactly.
would
It's
shoot like miniature version of himself from his eyes, and
yeah, and
they
it's like,
would
what
go
the
and
hell,
do
dude?
action, like yeah,
Yeah, and that's where, like, I don't like rule of cool if that's what it means, if it's just like total gonzo nonsense. But if you're, if you're sticking to your thing, I don't need you to justify to me your character's abilities if you have just spent them. And if you're slightly wrong, if you've got, one more feat than you should have at this level, oh no, maybe I'll audit your character sheet after the game and we'll we'll rectify things, and we can decide that in that moment you just had a burst of adrenaline and you could do something that you can't do consistently, something like
yeah.
that.
I still say something like that. Done right, combat could be conversational with very short span of time.
Mm,
I agree with that, and that's
mm,
something I'm trying to get done with the system, the game I'm writing. But I think this can almost be an
mm,
episode of it on itself, or maybe like half an episode sometime, like
mm,
doing combat in a
mm.
conventional manner, like going back. I don't know. Maybe we should talk about that at some point.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
don't think
But
about it. But and also there's crossover tactical cinematic, crossover simulationist tactic. Who's seen
mhm,
these ridiculous self-defense videos where your attacker punches, and in response to the attacker punching, you're gonna step to the left, give him an uppercut, give him a hook, give him a shovel hook, then you're gonna grab him from behind and trip him. And to his one action, you've done 4 or 5 different things, and he's just standing there. He hasn't even pulled his punch back, as
yeah.
as no one ever does in these videos. And it's like, so even if it's simulationist, that would be ridiculous. It wouldn't make sense. So
Hmm.
the cinematics is compatible with that simulation. You do one thing, I do one thing, I do 2 things, you do 2 things. And
Yeah.
the Italian swords masters, they've codified this. It's called tempo. You have a one tempo action. In 1 second, I do 2 things. In that same second, I could only do one thing. The economy of movement. And a lot of people don't like this term, action economy, but I look at treatises that were written 500 years ago and go, well, real people are talking about this not in game terms.
Yeah.
There's an economy of movement. It's a real thing. So,
Yeah, and something we talk about also, like, well, your arm move faster than your leg and shit like
mhm.
that.
Yep.
It's like when people would
Yeah.
go fucking deep with that.
Sorry, maybe the victim in those videos are super. Yeah, like if you're a monk, or if you're role playing Bruce Lee and the guy you're fighting is just some random,
Yeah.
karate white belt. Yeah, sure, you can get off your super fast combos on him, but
If you're being attacked by an opossum,
that's
right?
that's the context. Yeah, yeah,
Gonna freeze after. Yeah.
yeah.
Need more combos. If 5 mechanics have action, bonus action, free action, and reaction to drag out combat. Yeah, and that's a problem also because, well,
Hmm.
reaction happen like out of turn, right?
Yeah,
Out of
yeah.
your
And
but all the
you
other
have
one,
to.
like
Mm,
people now gonna do like those treating like in their
mm,
turn, like, oh, I'm gonna do this for an action and this for a body action, and then I'm gonna, you know, and then like the rest of the scene is frozen, or it feels like, like in theory everything should happen in the same time, but it feels like
mm,
things are frozen because now you just have
yeah.
this character doing those one thing, this list of thing, right?
Mm.
So that really doesn't help with the cinematic vibe at all.
Yeah, and a lot of the reactions are sort of no-brainers. They're the illusion of choice. Like, I want to
Yeah,
actively block with my shield, and it's like, when do you not want to block the axe that's coming at your head? Right?
yeah,
That's not really a choice. Your choice is I let him hit me in the head, or I intelligently defend myself. So yeah, and
yeah.
when you have those fake choices, all you're doing is you're adding time. You're
And
just
also
dragging
like
it out.
they're fake choices because, like, oh, I get to do this reaction,
Mm.
there's no cost to it, right? Like, the
Yeah,
trigger has been pressed, so yeah,
you
I'm just
get
gonna
one
do it,
every
right?
turn, so you might as well use it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like you
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
So there's no, yeah,
And then it can lead to this even worse. You're trying to optimize your turn so that you're sitting there worried, like, is there something I haven't used that can help us in this situation? And you're staring at your character sheet like, yeah, and yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Is there anything else you wanted to add on this topic of cinematic play before we start like wrapping up?
hmm. That's actually a good thing I had in the notes. Sardito says here, are there rules for throwing sand in his eye? Uh, do you have hands? uh,
Yeah,
the characters have appendages and senses, and they can see things. So, on one hand, it's important for GMs to accurately, or at least give enough of a description of a place. I've seen a few videos recently of actual plays where I have no idea where the characters are because the GM has described like one thing, like there's a castle. It's like I have no idea where the characters are in relation to the castle. I have no idea, what kind of castle. What are we talking like a late Spanish fort? Or are we talking like an early, so I need some more than that. It doesn't need to be giant walls of text descriptions where you just talk at the players for 5 minutes uninterrupted. Likewise, though, I think what's more important is the characters have eyes, the characters have hands, they can see things that's going on in the world. The players should be able to interject some things here and
Yep.
there. You described that there's a busy city center. You haven't specifically pointed out there's a woman, a businesswoman walking down. Well, I go and stop a woman and ask her, hey, could you tell me what the time is? Don't you shouldn't get in there and say there is no woman, because now the player is going, crap, my
Yep.
character is schizophrenic. They may not literally be thinking that, but
That's something I was discussing. I think it was in my last video that when I do like
mm,
on the beach, right? And that's something
mhm,
I was talking about. Like when you let the player interject stuff like that, right? It
mm,
makes the scene feel more alive because now they can like free their imagination and just like, they say it's a busy street. Now they can start imagining people. They don't need the permission of the GM to get those character in, right?
mm,
So now when you say, oh, I stop a woman there and ask what time it is, right? It feels like the world is inhabited, right?
mhm,
There's
yeah,
stuff going on and outside of what like the GM specifically described, right? Just like
mhm,
or
yeah.
it fleshed out a lot, right?
Yeah, and likewise with the "do you have hands" thing,
Hmm.
it goes with the Mother May I, the question asking, when in a
Yeah.
movie, in any movie, have you seen somebody turn to the camera, staring at a door, asking no one in particular if the door is locked? You
Hmm.
don't. They jiggle I jiggle the door
Exactly.
handle. I check if it's locked, right? You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Oh, hey,
But
Crispy. Yes, you will have
yeah,
to
hello,
catch the
Christian.
replay.
Yeah. I think that goes a bit outside of the scope there, but like that's
Mm,
something I think we should talk about too, like doing
mm,
description, like the
mhm.
level of description we do, what like how to do efficient description.
Mhm.
I think you know what? Are,
Thank you,
are we done with
Discus.
the cinematic play?
I think so. I think we can spend the last few minutes here catching up on comments and planning the next one.
Yeah, but I think the next one, and also like Black Lodge Game is gonna stream right after we're done here, like
Mhm.
at 9:30.
Mhm.
So I don't want to step on them because I
Yeah.
want to go watch them. I'm not gonna,
I've got to go
I don't
get
like
dinner,
your show
so
like those guys. What?
I've got to go get dinner, so yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but
mm,
what I was saying, I think next week we could talk about doing description, right? Doing efficient description because we don't have like those big wall of text.
yeah, yeah.
We don't want to be too
Yeah.
vague,
Mhm.
finding this right spot. And are we trying to hit the two subject? What was the one that Dice still was saying, which we need to talk about? Fuck, I forgot.
Combat being
Yeah.
reactionary, being like one. I
Oh
give
yeah,
one thing, you give one thing.
conversational.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Conversational. Yeah.
Is that too big? Doing two in the same episode? Maybe we'll do the description,
Mm,
and then if we run out of time, we'll keep the conversational combat for some other time.
yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
That
Does that
sounds
sound like a
good to
plan?
me.
All right, I
Sounds
should
good to me.
I should note that right away because I'm gonna forget. Yeah. Any final word? Like just saying. I think that the most important point about cinematic play that we touched, yeah, it's
Mm,
pacing.
yep.
Um
Show don't tell.
Show don't tell, which we explain in the
Mm.
context of RPG what we mean by that. And
Understand the tone and setting of
yeah,
whatever
respect
cinema
the
you're
tone
trying
and
to
setting.
emulate.
Yeah. And the trust between GM and player as well. I
Yep.
think that's a
Mm,
big that's gonna be play a big part in the in
mhm,
the in the pacing.
mhm.
Yeah.
And likewise, there can be crossover between the multiple different styles, right? It's pretty unlikely that you'll be 100% cinematic.
Yeah.
Um,
They're all those things, like with
mm,
style of play and stuff like
mm,
that, they're like aim that you put for yourself,
mhm,
target basically. We're
mhm,
trying to stay cinematic and stuff like that, and then like you're gonna hit like to a certain extent, right, to a certain percentage.
mhm,
But yeah, sometimes it's gonna happen that no, well, now it's slowed down a bit there, and then you can
mhm.
think about it and say like, well, what could we have done differently in that
Yeah,
part, right? You can talk after
yeah.
the game. Drag
And
down a bit there.
yeah, and I wanted to
Oh
answer
yeah.
Need More Cowbell's question at
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
end here,
Forgot. Yeah.
because I think, are we talking about Chekhov's gun? I don't think so, because I
No.
think by necessity, because it's not pre-written, you can't know what will be
Yeah.
necessary to the narrative.
But in the same
There,
time,
yeah,
also, every gun can be a Chekhov gun, right?
yes,
If you
exactly.
describe in
Yeah,
a scene that there's like
Mhm.
this rifle over the
Mhm.
mantle,
Yeah.
which is just like a throwaway stuff in the description
Yeah.
to
Mhm.
make the place feel more lived in, right?
Mhm.
Then at some point the character can go back, I fucking go over the fireplace and pick up the shotgun there,
Yeah.
and then there's
Yeah.
no ammo in it,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, thank you, Doc Flamingo. That's
Oh yeah, yeah.
great.
I thought I tried. It was I never saw
Yeah.
you before.
Cool. Yeah.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah,
Um, but yeah, so it's both nothing is a Chekhov's gun and everything's a Chekhov's gun, I suppose. That's
yeah.
like an interesting as it's
The
that
Schrodinger Chekhov's gun.
yeah, as a
It's
tabletop,
not a Chekhov's gun until you
eh,
open the box.
yeah, exactly. Until it becomes every NPC is a throwaway NPC until they become this super important, the center of a murder mystery out of
Yeah,
nowhere. And that's sort of the beauty. One of the beautiful things about tabletop RPGs is that they're procedurally generated. You don't know until it happens, right? At least that's how it should be, right? And
yeah.
that's the big
You're laying the road ahead of you as you're walking on it.
yeah, yeah. That's the
Mm,
my big misunderstanding with cinematic at first of no, it
yeah.
isn't pre-written.
No,
It's not.
it isn't
Yeah,
written,
yeah,
and it doesn't also like just anything goes, rule of cool and
yeah,
stuff like that.
yeah.
That's
Just
also a big
yeah,
part.
just like
We're talking about
movies
the
where
with about
anything goes
pacing.
are
Yeah.
they're stupid.
Oh,
They're
and one other thing also that's important that we discuss about like the pacing and stuff like that, like every people at the table can move the scene around, right?
yes,
Even like it's the responsibility of everyone to preserve the pacing.
yeah.
Uh,
Lots of the best scenes in movies were determined out of the actors. It wasn't the director or the writer writing a scene. It was an actor there improvising something, making adding something to the scene. Um,
yeah.
yeah. Yep.
All right. On that note, I guess we might wrap it up. We're a bit
Yep.
short, but I think it
Mm-hmm.
was a good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have something else to add to it,
Uh,
little
don't
firewall, no.
don't particularly think so. I think we
All
covered that
right.
one really thoroughly.
What you got coming on your channel, Tyler?
Hopefully a video, more Hema focused video, but
Okay.
even if you're not into historical European martial arts, since we have some new people here, hopefully it will give some maybe ideas of what people are doing in their 5 foot square when they're not literally moving around. If you run a D20 system, some more insight into how people move around, things like that. It's tricky to film because I don't have enough room indoors and it's freezing outside. So uh, I'm trying to film it correctly, trying to do some POV stuff without it being nauseating.
Oh yeah.
And
You need to invest in the GoPro.
yeah, yeah. So it's
Make it
a
clear.
yeah, yeah. It's a challenge
Yeah.
to do that. My
Yeah.
channel
Oh,
name. It's
it's
right under my
Telegram. Do you
name.
want? Yeah,
Yep,
you got the link in the description as well.
yep.
I
We
guess then it
stream
should
there
work.
as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, uh, yeah. Indiana Jones, Sword Spinning Raiders. Um, but yeah. So yeah, more Hemo focused stuff on the way since people have asked for that sort of content. I found a
Yeah.
lot of the
And
Hema
people.
stuff on YouTube is aimed at someone who's already into Hema. It's at like a higher level of stuff,
Yeah.
and it's sort of and the books. If you just jump into the historical treatises, they assume you already know something about sword fighting, so it's a lot of technical detail. Not to mention that you're being translated past 2 or 3 languages. So more stuff on that, stuff on how the historical European martial arts can tie into and martial arts in general. I plan on having a uh, visualization as a skill for both martial arts and tabletop RPGs.
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. For me, tomorrow I'm gonna be on a game, the second session of the game of Werewolf that we had last week, actually
Nice.
on Friday as well. And we talked about it. We always do those talk after the game, and then we
Mhm.
also did like on Fill the Trails channel, which was the GM for that game. We did what do you call like RPG tweaker. We went go back on some scene and we discussed like okay, what happened here, what we did, what could have been done better, because we do those games and we put them live as well because we're trying to improve ourselves and then we discuss and that's why we do discussion around them, right? we're still like trying to get better as a role player, and we hope that those are helpful to people like that also want to improve themselves, like in the hobby, right? So we're gonna have the session 2 of that game on Friday with Crispy, GM Cody, and Phil the Trill being the GM. And then on Monday, I'm gonna have the session 2 of the Travelers game that was GM by Rick of the channel 28mm RPG, and Crispy is also in there, and Big Bad RPG. And very excited for both those games. That's gonna be fucking great. They're gonna be streamed everywhere, so you can find them on my channel. You can find them in their channel, whatever. You can spread the love around.
Yeah.
But if you want to see like like actually how we do it, we talk a lot about like what you should do, what you shouldn't do in role playing stuff like that. Now you can see us like do it, give the example and stuff like that. So and then like I said, we have the discussion afterward. Well, we do the self critic and stuff like that. So I hope you're gonna join us for those. Like, of course, like we do them live, but we don't interact really with the chat after during the game. Afterward, in the talk, we do take questions and stuff like that. So you can join us there. And on Sunday, I'm gonna have my Sunday show at 10 past 9 Eastern time, and 10 past 9 p.m. Eastern time. Uh, so you can also, if you want to just talk, and it's more like an open forum kind of thing. So you're welcome there as well. Thank you very
I
much.
can't wait about you, but thank you, Ardito.
Oh, sure. From Ontario. I used to live in Ontario like just like 2 months ago. So now I'm back in Quebec. Yeah. All right. Take care, guys. Thank you, Tyler, for joining me. Have a good night. And thank you, everybody that joined in chat. Thank you, everybody that watched later on the replay. I hope this was interesting or useful. And I'll talk to you soon next week, talking about efficient description or good description in RPG. We're going to talk about that, and conversational combat if we have time to get to it. Take care, guys.
See ya.